How's it going, YouTube? Opening day was awesome. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're going to recap all of the day's action next on Kokomo Friday.
Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in Boca. Peralta, Manoa, bounce back for Aaronola. Giolito, Castillo, Yoshida, Mosu,
Giancarlo Enfado, value so high, but ADP so low. Frank Love's tips up kinda Joe. Now let's get on with the show.
Happy Kokomo Friday and welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on April 8th. Frank Stampfl joined by Scott White. Opening day is in the books. We only had 7 games and it still feels like there is so much to talk about. So today on the show, we're going to recap all the action that Chris Paddack for Taylor Rogers trade actually went through. So we'll talk about that as well. Week 2 sleepers and much more. Scott, I tried to get rid of the, oh my goodness gracious. People have spoken. The listeners spoke. They reached out. They emailed in. They tweeted at me, and they said, "Stick with it." They want to stick with. Oh my goodness gracious! Now, I want to kind of create a little bit of a rotation here because I still feel like we overdo it. So if anyone has great baseball calls, something that you love throughout the years, send it over. Tweet it at me. Email us fantasybaseball@cbsi.com. I want to make a little bit of a rotation that we'll start the podcast with every single day. And with that, take it away, Susan.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Player of opening day. Scott, kick us off.
Well, I'm not going to claim this is the most important thing that happened, so I don't know that this needs to lead off the show, but this is when we're doing it, and it made me say, oh, my goodness gracious. Oh, my goodness gracious was what Spencer Strider did in 2 innings of relief for the Braves. 2 perfect innings. Struck out 5, had a whiff rate, a swinging strike rate of 33%, 8 swinging strikes on 24 pitches, which is just absurd. And this is the guy I've hyped it every chance I could get because between 4 minor league stops last year, he did 21% swinging strike rate. That's like Jacob deGrom level, you know, and we saw him a little bit in relief toward the end of last season. And, we didn't. It was his first stint in the majors and like it didn't blow anybody away. So this was really the first time we've seen him in the majors. And you say, wow, I see where that swinging strike rate came from. That fastball is just overpowering and a great slider to go with it. And I like that he went 2 innings because obviously the only thing that makes him worth talking about in a fantasy baseball context is the possibility of him entering the starting rotation at some point. He moved so quickly through the minors last year that I'm not sure he has a full enough arsenal to make that leap yet. And I'm not sure if he'll get a chance to develop it now that he's pitching out of the bullpen. But maybe they send him down when the rosters go back to 26 players and he gets stretched out and we see him again and he's an impact pitcher in fantasy. I think we should have about the same level of optimism for Spencer Strider that we do for Aaron Ashby because I think they're on similar trajectories and I think they have similar upside.
All right, Spencer Strider is 7% rostered. I guess, Scott, the question is, what do we do with Spencer Strider right now? Do we add him in deep leagues? Do we just put him on the watch list for now and hope that he gets an opportunity in the rotation eventually? What do we do with this amazing outing that he had?
Yeah, so that's why it's awkward to lead the show with him because there's not much you add him to the scout team, basically keep an eye on him in deeper leagues. If you have a roster spot to play with, sure. Stashing upside is never a problem, but he's in his current role. He's not going to be that usable. It's just speculating on the future for what's obviously an impressive pitching talent.
Fair enough. Yeah. You mentioned 2 perfect innings, 5 strikeouts to 0 walks. Fastball looked overpowering, 8 swinging strikes on 24 pitches, 33% swinging strike rate in this outing. He looked amazing. And he's, I would say, I don't know, a couple of Kyle Wright blowups or Tucker Davidson not looking right, opportunities
Yeah.
from Spencer Strider,
There's
getting
going to be an
into
opening at
rotation.
some point. It's
Yeah.
just a question of whether the Braves think he's ready to do that, or if he makes himself too vital to the bullpen for them to even consider it.
All right, Scott. Well, I will let you have a oh my goodness gracious player of the night, because I know the other player that you were debating talking about was also amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's anything that actionable for him either, because he's universally rostered, and it's Shohei Ohtani, who I think, because he did something so historic, something we haven't seen from a player arguably ever, certainly in the last century, his success as a two-way player. I think there was some skepticism he could do it again. And of course, one day isn't the same as doing it over a season, but he looked even better as a pitcher in this first start. He was going against the major's best offense last year, the Astros, and just was awesome. He was awesome. He struck out 9 in 4 2/3 innings. Okay, 4 2/3 innings, fine. Most pitchers had very short outings their first time out because spring training was so short. But 9 strikeouts and 4 2/3 innings against the major's best offense last year. And beyond that, his velocity was way up across the board. He averaged nearly 98 on his fastball. As good as he is as a hitter, it makes me wonder if there's maybe another step for him to take as a pitcher here. And maybe it will be something of a debate which role you use him in those leagues where you have to pick and choose going into each scoring period, because it was really impressive stuff from him. And, part of it too is I wonder if he'll be able to take a more regular 6th turn through the rotation this year. Kind of last year, they obviously had to limit his innings. It was his first full year pitching after Tommy John. And they kind of just randomly, it felt random anyway, decided, okay, Shohei Ohtani's going to start this day. And we had to scramble to get him in our lineups in the leagues where we could. But hopefully it's a more regular turn, and maybe we see even more of him in that role than we did last year. That's the hope anyway. There may be more upside here for Ohtani.
Yeah, 17.5% swinging strike rate in the start against the Houston Astros, a team that typically does not strike out very much. He struck out Jose Altuve 3 times. Altuve's strikeout rate last year was 13.4%. Ohtani was amazing. So if you play in a daily lineup league where you can start him as a pitcher on the days that he pitches and as a hitter on the days that he is not pitching, then I hope you used your first overall pick on him, because it looks like it is going to be well worth it for Shohei Ohtani. For me, Scott, oh my goodness gracious player, Tyler Megill. He looked very good against the Washington Nationals. 5 shutout innings here, 3 hits, 0 walks, 6 strikeouts. Kind of just thrust into this opening day start because of the injury to Jacob deGrom. Max Scherzer tweaked his hamstring, so they pushed Max Scherzer back until Friday. Scherzer will actually be making that start. 10 swinging strikes on 68 pitches, right around a 15% swinging strike rate. And the fastball velo was up for him too. 1.5 miles per hour. He averaged 96 miles per hour in this start. And he's only 36% rostered. So I think this is actually a player that we can go out there and we can add right now. He's at the Phillies next week. I don't know if, I'm necessarily going to throw him in my lineup right away. There were 3 names that stood out to me on CBS that are over 60% rostered. Casey Mize, German Marquez, Patrick Corbin. I'd be okay dropping any of those for Tyler Megill.
Yeah, I would too. That's a good call. That's actually an actionable pick. I was telling you before the show that I think if we're excluding relievers, which I'm sure we'll get to them soon. If we're excluding relievers, Tyler Megill stands out as the one player who is, based on what he did opening day, somebody you might consider picking up right away. Because, that increase in velocity for him was impressive. He had a fastball. He hit 99.1 with one of his fastballs, 10 swinging strikes on 68 pitches. That's obviously an incredible swinging strike rate. And I think it's opened my mind to what Tyler Megill's upside. You want to call him Tyler Megill, but it's actually Tyler Megill, what his upside is.
All right, we're in. Go ahead, Tyler Megill. Even if you have a roster spot available, a bunch of players went on the IL on Thursday. So you throw those players on the injured list. You have an open roster spot. Go out there and get Tyler Megill on your team if you can. It's got a near, oh my goodness gracious, player for the wrong reasons. Feel like we got to talk about this pretty early. Shane Bieber limited to just 72 pitches in his first start, which I'm not really worried about that. I think that makes sense. He had an abbreviated spring training. He allowed just 1 run on 4 2/3. It wound up being an earned run, but the player who scored was on second base because Amed Rosario dropped a fly ball in left field. I don't know why they keep trying to put Amed Rosario in left field. He's not good there. Anyway, the bigger story for Shane Bieber is that he averaged just 90.6 miles per hour on his fastball. It is the lowest for any start in his major league career. Now, I know the weather was not good there. It was cold, it was rainy, it was windy, but this is down even further from where it was last year, 92.8 miles per hour. So I don't want to overreact, Scott, because there's going to be a bunch more starts and obviously, more data will come and we could see what the velo looks then. But I also feel like this is something worth talking about and paying attention to.
Yeah, it is. It's a stressor that's been added for anyone who has Shane Bieber that wasn't there before. I mean, there were some concerns about how he'd bounce back from an injury-plagued year, but I don't think anyone is expecting him to average 90 miles per hour, closer to 91, right, on his fastball in the opener. A few things. You pointed one out. It was very cold. It was sleeting or something, he said, when he was warming up. I think it got up to high 40s, but not baseball weather, clearly. And we saw in another game, but also in the Midwest where it was in the 40s, we saw Corbin Burns' velocity down. We saw Aaron Ashby's velocity down. So, sometimes that affects pitchers more than others. 2, he's not fully stretched out yet. He threw 72 pitches. That was true for a lot of pitchers, but it's worth considering that aspect of it also. 3, he was effective. Was he Jacob deGrom level effective like we saw in 2020? No, but I don't think anyone expects Shane Bieber to do that ever again. Was he effective enough that you could still see him being an ace if this remains his velocity all season long? I think so. It was the Royals lineup, so that's worth taking into consideration. But when you have we've seen various pitchers over the Chris Sale stands out when they have that clear ace arsenal. Their success isn't so tied to the velocity of their fastball. And with Bieber specifically, his 2 breaking balls, the curveball and slider, are so dominant. And the fastball is almost like a change of pace pitch from them. So I'd rather have him have more velocity than less. And I hope he regains it. And I think it's right to have some concern about what it looked like in this start. But I don't think it's time to panic. I wouldn't be looking to trade him for, I mean, if you wanted to consider another hitter who was going in that range, fine. That's a lateral move. You just don't want that stressor. I can understand that, but I'm not trading down at starting pitcher with Shane Bieber right now. I'm not offering him up for Sandy Alcantara or Julio Urias or one of those other pitchers that would have been in the tier below him on draft day. I don't think it's time to do that.
Yeah, I think the key words there that you said, Scott, don't panic. It's one day so far of baseball, and it's very easy to see velocity down and, what do I do? Do I just go out and trade Shane Bieber? No, let's see how things unfold here. Don't panic. There's a lot of baseball to go.
And I happened to see the scrum with the reporters after the game, and one of them did ask him about his velocity, if he was happy with where it was. It took a while to get to that question. Most were just asking about how good he looked, frankly. But then somebody asked about the velocity, and he kind of laughed it off and said, "You guys asked me about this 2 years ago too, or last year, I guess," referring to that start in Detroit when his velocity was also down. Not as much, as you point out, Frank. But it didn't seem like anybody involved in that conversation was particularly concerned about velocity. So worth mentioning that too.
All right. I know you mentioned Corbin Burns in there, Scott. I just wanted to quickly run through his line from the day. He was pretty meh. In a start against the Cubs, I think coming off the NL Cy Young, we were expecting more than this. 5 innings, 3 runs, 3 walks, 4 strikeouts. Only 11 swinging strikes on 83 pitches. Velocity was fine. Spin rate was down a little bit on the cutter, but nothing drastic. I think he was just off. The command didn't look very good in this start. I'm not overly concerned with Corbin Burnes either.
Yeah, no, I'm not either. The velocity was a little down, but otherwise everything seemed fine.
Let's move over to the pitcher on the other side of that game, though. So a few of your pitching targets, Scott, in draft season, they came through on opening day. Kyle Hendricks, Zach Greinke, Adam Wainwright, they all looked pretty good. But we'll start with Kyle Hendricks here. 5 1/3, 1 run, 3 walks, a hit by pitch. So like the control was a little bit off here. 7 strikeouts, 17 swinging strikes on 83 pitches. Like he basically pulled a Corbin Burnes against Corbin Burnes. He was awesome. 13 of those swinging strikes came on the changeup, which he used 40% of the time in this start. Scott. Like if the changeup is going to look like this good, it was gift worthy, like pitching ninja stuff. This changeup was amazing. If it's going to look that good, then I feel all right about the Kyle Hendricks bounce back.
Yeah, I mean, I doubt it's going to look that good every start, but
Right.
You can understand why he threw it 40% of the time. And it was the one early game today, the one pre-4 o'clock game because of some cancellations. So it was the one I'm sure the majority of baseball fans sat down and watched together. You know, everybody saw Kyle Hendricks and how that changeup was moving today. But yeah, I mean, clearly he still has some skills he's working with there. And I don't think if you viewed last season as a collapse, I think this opening day start should relieve those concerns. Not saying he'll never have a bad start this year. He's always susceptible to that because he's not able to blow his fastball by hitters, obviously. But I think overall, you'll be pretty happy with Kyle Hendricks.
Oh, I've got the West Coast games on right now. Anthony Rendon just missed a 2-run homer down the line. It was just left of the foul pole. So if anything happens in these games crazy, I'll let you know. Darvish had a no-hitter through 6 innings. We'll get to that a little bit later on as well. Scott, after Kyle Hendricks came out of the game, this is where we start to get into some of that reliever talk that you mentioned at the top of the show, because Rowan Wick came in, pitched in the 8th inning with a 2-run lead. He gave up 2 hits and a run. Michael Givens then came in, relieved Rowan Wick. He got the final out of the 8th. Then we're left wondering, okay, is Givens going to stay in for the 9th and try and get the save? No, it's David Robertson who comes in. He allowed 1 hit, picked up his first save of the season, the first save of the baseball season. 25% rostered on CBS. How aggressive are we going to be with David Robertson? Because for at least one day, it looks like he is going to be the 9th inning guy for the Cubs.
Yeah, that's the trouble with chasing saves in the year of our Lord 2022 is that like you can't feel that confident that what happens one day is going to happen the next day with any bullpen. But I started to get the feeling, and I put in a claim for him in Tout Wars for the first run of Fab, but of course I won my top 7 players. So I think I probably had the highest bid on David Robertson, but it just didn't get far enough down in my pecking order. So now is, any leagues where he's out there and saves are precious. I'm sure he's going to be in high demand. There's nothing to indicate it's not conventional closer usage, right? Because they used the 2 clearest alternatives in the previous inning as if they were just setting up for David Robertson. And David Robertson has the most closing experience in that bullpen. It's been a few years since he's done it, but because of health issues mainly. But he used to be a great closer. So I could see how he could be the guy. And in leagues where saves are precious, you can't afford to be too careful because everybody's going to get gobbled up right away. So I think I think I'd place if I really needed saves, I think I'd place a decent sized bid on David Robertson, make him. I would say there are 2. There's one reliever that I'd prioritize over Robertson, and Tony Santillan, who got the save for the Reds.
You would prioritize him over
Yes.
David Robertson.
Yes.
I don't feel as confident, Scott, because I feel like when Lucas Sims is ready to return, look, if Santillan is pitching well, then they'll just leave him in the role. But
Right.
I also think Lucas Sims is a pretty talented pitcher. And as you just laid out, David Robertson has much more closing experience than someone like, Tony Santillan does with the Cincinnati Reds. So I think I would still go Robertson over Santillan, but if you need saves, you should probably target both of them, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't, like I said, Tyler Megill is a fine target too as a starting pitcher. But if we're just talking about the saves pickups, like you say Lucas Sims is a talented pitcher, and I don't disagree, but he wasn't able to secure that role for the Reds last year. And Tony Santillan's a talented pitcher too. In his appearances as a reliever last year, and the overall numbers, they weren't bad, but when he moved to the bullpen is really where they took off. Let me see how many appearances that was. So he made 22 appearances as a reliever for the Reds last year. Had a 2.36 ERA, a 101 WHIP, 12.2 strikeouts per 9 innings. I mean,
that's pretty awesome.
Ace reliever numbers. And then he gets the first chance here to close out a game and passes it with flying colors. So, of course, every reliever's a bad week away from every closer's a bad week away from losing his job. And when you're less established like Santillan is, it might just be a bad day from losing his job. So, yeah, it may not work out, but I think it could work out too. I mean, Art Warren didn't pitch in this game. Art Warren was the one we were looking at as the potential, as the guy who could potentially seize the role with Lucas Sims out. But he wasn't even asked to work the eighth, and I guess it didn't become a safe situation till the ninth, right?
It was kind of weird in that way because it was a 6-1 game, and whoever was pitching at the time, it wasn't Art Warren. Luis Cessa actually even pitched before that. That gentleman gave up a 2-run homer, which made it a save opportunity in the eighth.
Yeah.
So then after that, they get Tony Santillan.
And I think Santillan had to start warming up early because of that. So, again, it's hard to feel too confident in anything that you've seen. But when you look at what he did in relief last year, and I remember explicitly they said they wanted him to be a high leverage reliever, and he was in consideration for a rotation spot early in spring training, but at one point they said this is going to be a high leverage reliever for us. You see the numbers he had in relief last year. He gets the first shot. Maybe it wasn't by plan, just because he happened to be warmed up already, but he strikes out 2 in a perfect inning. That could be enough for him to get the next chance too.
Yep.
So I hear what you're saying, but I'm not confident Robertson is good enough to keep the job. I feel more confident that Santillan has the skills for the role than I do in Robertson having the skills for the role. So that's why I think it took us a while to get there, but that's why I think I prefer Santillan to Robertson if you're having to prioritize those two. But there may be even a better prospective saves pickup out there who didn't pitch today because his team didn't play today.
Who is that?
That is Anthony Bender.
Oh,
Don Mattingly has said that he's their go-to option for the 9th inning, at least to begin the year, with Dylan Floro unavailable. But he's better than Dylan Floro. And we always worried he was going to be a threat to Floro's role at some point. I just didn't expect to get something so definitive right away, from Mattingly. Bender's the guy. Okay. Well, that counts for more than this guessing game we have going on with David Robertson and Tony Santillan. So if he goes right to the top of the waiver claim list for me, if I'm looking for saves. If I don't need saves, obviously, who cares? But a lot of people out there do need saves.
All right, Scott. So, let's just talk about relievers that we're dropping to pick these guys up. Someone asked me as soon as Robertson got the save, should I drop Camilo Doval for David Robertson? And I was like, I think so. Like Gabe Kapler said that Jake McGee is the closer. And even if he's not, I think that they can kind of split the role. So yeah, I think I would do that. What do you say? Doval for Robertson, or I guess any of these relievers?
I go back to, I'm just not sure Robertson's good enough. He may be the best reliever in that bullpen because they don't have great relievers, but I'm not confident in that. So I'm a lot more skeptical that Jake McGee's really the Giants closer. We've talked about this before. So I am attached to Camilo Doval in a way that you aren't. I don't think I'd do that. I don't think so. Now, somebody did ask me in a saves plus holds league if they would drop Robert Suarez, not Ranger Suarez, Robert Suarez, the Padres reliever, who looked like he was in line for saves until they went and acquired Taylor Rogers. And by the way, Bob Melvin, the Padres manager, confirmed that Taylor Rogers will be the Padres closer. So Robert Suarez isn't a closer anymore, but it's a saves plus hold league. And I told him he could drop Robert Suarez for David Robertson in that particular format.
Yeah.
But it was a close call is the thing. Like, I just feel like that's your one chance at David Robertson. Well, you may have future chances at Robert Suarez.
Okay, so you're not dropping Doval for Robertson in a league with just saves. Would you drop Doval for any of Bender or Santillan?
I would drop him for Bender.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Bender's a confirmed closer as far as I'm concerned. Now,
Yep.
he may get rocked in his first outing and not be a confirmed closer anymore, but I think he's good, and Mattingly says he's the guy. So yeah, I would prioritize him over somebody else who I think is good and hasn't been confirmed as the guy.
Okay. Last two questions here. Anyone from the Mariners, Rangers bullpen, those two bullpens, would you be comfortable dropping those names? I know it's a lot of names, but there's no confirmed closer for any of those. And here we have, three that we feel pretty good about. Would you be all right making those swaps?
Yes. I don't think I need to hold anyone in the mirror because that's just such a mess.
Yep.
I would take any prospective closer unless it's a saves plus holds league, because obviously Paul Sewald has those amazing ratios. But any other Mariners reliever, even in a saves plus hold leagues, I would drop for any of the guys we've talked about, Anthony Bender or Tony Santillan or David Robertson.
All right. I mentioned at the top of this, we started talking about Kyle Hendricks. Zach Greinke was very serviceable in his return, 5 2/3, 1 run, only 1 strikeout. Adam Wainwright, surprise, surprise, delivers the first quality start of the season, and he also gets the win. 6 shutout, 5 hits, 6 strikeouts, 0 walks. The 2022 Masters is underway, and the First Cut Golf Podcast has you covered with round-by-round coverage after every tournament day. Rick Gaiman, Kyle Porter, and the First Cut crew are breaking down the odds board every night and bringing you analysis from the grounds of Augusta National. Go join the First Cut Golf Podcast, available wherever you are listening to this podcast. And right after you do that, join our Fantasy Baseball Today Facebook group. If you haven't already, it's a fun community of other listeners. They're answering questions, helping each other out, having fun. Facebook.com/groups/fantasy baseball today. Let's get into some news and notes, and then we'll get back into the rest of opening day's action. Okay, trades. We had some trades on Thursday. Surprise. It's basically been the story of the offseason. Excuse me. The Padres and the Twins actually went through with that reported trade from Wednesday night. Chris Paddack, Emilio Pagan, and a player to be named later to the Minnesota Twins in exchange for Taylor Rogers and outfielder Brent Rooker. And Scott, as you mentioned, Bob Melvin already named Taylor Rogers as the team's closer. So good news there. However, there is a ripple effect. I would assume that in any type of saves league, we can drop Robert Suarez.
Yes, though he may get the save here on opening day because Taylor Rogers isn't available yet. Apparently, he's warming up to enter in the night. So that's going to be extra confusing for everybody. But yeah, I would say traditional fantasy leagues that only reward saves, Robert Suarez, again, not Ranger Suarez, can be dropped.
All right. And then remind the listeners how you would prioritize the Twins relievers. I know we spoke about this speculatively on yesterday's podcast, but there's Tyler Duffy, Jorge Alcala, Yoan, I believe you pronounce his last name Duran. That's what you said yesterday. And then now Emilio Pagan is in the mix as well.
Yeah, I have no idea. It's gonna take a few weeks for that situation to shake out, I think. You're forcing me to pick up somebody. I'm gonna say on a hunch, Jorge Alcala, who was he seemed to overtake Tyler Duffy as the 8th inning guy late last year, and I think he's a better bat misser than Tyler Duffy. But it could be either one of them, and like Yohan Duran, like I feel like he's a dark horse to be just like this ace reliever type. So I wouldn't forget about him either. But Jorge Alcala's my guess for who is prioritized in the 9th inning to start out.
All right. The Padres, by the way, they have a 2-run lead and they're in the top of the 9th. So I guess we'll find out right away who's pitching the bottom of the 9th. My guess would be Robert Suarez. He hasn't pitched yet in this game. Taylor Rogers, not yet ready to go for the Padres. Apparently the Twins will go with a 6-man rotation. Scott, do you have any interest in Chris Paddack? He's 24% rostered on CBS.
No, but I do want to say vindication for the Marlins, who at one point in time traded Chris Paddack to the Padres for Fernando Rodney, and for a while there it looked like it was going to be one of the all-time trade blunders. Funny the way things work out. Now it seems like the Padres traded Fernando Rodney for Taylor Rogers. I know that's not exactly right, but it's just kind of funny the way Chris Paddack's stock has changed over the past couple years.
Yeah, I remember his rookie season. We were talking about, I don't know if you were, but I saw around the industry that, he's like a top 10, top 15 starting pitcher for Dynasty. And that's how quickly things can change with starting pitchers. It's just crazy. The other trade that went down on Thursday, much smaller trade. The Blue Jays acquired outfielder Bradley Zimmer from the Guardians for reliever Anthony Castro. Good news for Ke'Bryan Hayes is that he signed an 8-year, $70 million contract extension. That was to start Thursday. And then the bad news was that he exited Thursday's game in the very first inning. And he left with cramping in his left thumb and forearm. I was all nervous, Scott, because he's holding his wrist, the forearm area. And last year, he missed all that time with his left wrist injury. And I think that's what many people attribute his just really bad season. If we're being honest, in terms of power, there was nothing there for Ke'Bryan Hayes last year. So hopefully this isn't something that lingers again. But apparently he's good to go and he'll be back in the lineup by Saturday. So something to watch there with Ke'Bryan Hayes. From one third base injury to another, the White Sox placed Yoan Moncada on the IL with an oblique strain. He's expected to miss 3 weeks. Leori Garcia and Jake Berger are expected to fill in. Scott, if you need a third base replacement, the names that stood out to me in shallower leagues, Jeimer Candelario and Eugenio Suarez.
I like both of their matchups for this upcoming week if we're thinking short term.
Okay.
I actually have Jeimer Candelario in the top 10 sleeper hitters for week 2, so that's one place to look. If you're in a deeper league, like Jake Berger is pretty interesting in his own right. He, the little bit we saw of him in the majors last year, he hit the ball very hard and had good power numbers in the minors too.
All right. If you are in a deeper league and need a third baseman, Jonathan Villar, especially if you're in a categories league, he didn't start on Thursday against a right-handed pitcher. So I thought that was curious, but I think when he plays, he could provide some steals. And then Kevin Smith, who we spoke about on yesterday's podcast. Again, those are just for deeper leagues. They're both rostered in less than 20% of CBS leagues. CJ Abrams, good news. He officially made the Padres roster. Congrats. You are on the bench on opening day against a lefty in Madison Bumgarner. And I mentioned this earlier in the week, Scott, where I heard a quote from Bob Melvin where he said he envisions this being a platoon situation where CJ Abrams will likely start at shortstop against right-handed pitching, and then Ha-Seong Kim will start against right-handed pitching. And so far, I think he's going to stick with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one game. Like, if CJ Abrams is as electrifying as we think he can be, I mean, you can't inhibit his development by only playing him against right-handed pitchers. So I think he could certainly force himself into a true everyday role. And like managers tend to mix it up more at the start of the season with their lineups. They eventually settle into a groove. And I think that's going to be especially true, particularly this season, because spring training was so short. And I know like the Phillies have talked about part of the reason they kept Bryson Stott up is because they don't feel like any of their middle infielders or any of their infielders are ready to play every day yet. And maybe that's how a lot of teams feel. So I wouldn't freak out so much if a player you like is out of the lineup on occasion here the first couple weeks. I think we're going to see a lot of that. In Abrams' case specifically, maybe it'll be a true lefty-righty thing, but I'm not sure that's going to be a long-standing issue for him. I'm still very excited to roster him in any league.
Boom! Alex Bregman and Yordan Alvarez go back-to-back home runs here in the 8th inning of that game. Nice to see some power from Alex Bregman early on. The Reds are still hopeful that Luis Castillo can return in April. Don Mattingly, we mentioned this already, said that Anthony Bender likely to get the first save opportunity for the Marlins. He's 25% rostered. Alex Cora said that the Red Sox won't have a set closer to start the season. Scott, let's throw Matt Barnes in that mix. Would you drop Barnes for any of Santillan, Bender, Robertson?
I think so. I hesitate because despite what Alex Cora says, I don't know who else would be the closer. I know Matt Barnes' velocity was down in spring training and they had some ideas for how they could fix it. Something was going on with his delivery and maybe he's saying that just because he wants to make sure Matt Barnes is okay before he commits to anything. But yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one. Definitely drop him for Bender, but it's a closer call. Santillan and Robertson. I think it kind of depends on how shallow your league is. You can get away with dropping Barnes more in a shallower league, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Robert Suarez, by the way, is indeed coming in for the 9th inning to secure a 2-run lead, trying to lock down the save for the Padres. Man, this sucks too. For people who drafted late or you picked up Robert Suarez, and I think that there was a real opportunity for him, especially if he converts this one. Like, he could have been the guy, but yeah, they traded for Taylor Rogers, and now it's going to be him.
And I thought I was speculating, like, are we sure Taylor Rogers is going to be the closer? Because he's the only, they have a bunch of high leverage righties and he would be the only lefty. But Bob Melvin cleared it up. So fortunately we don't have to speculate.
Yep. All right. Phillies outfielder Mickey Moniak, another unfortunate one here, diagnosed with a hairline fracture in his right hand, will miss the next 6 weeks, and spoke about him recently. And there was some hype growing. He was going to start in center field against right-handed pitching. That will not be the case. A few lineup notes from opening day. Dylan Carlson led off for the Cardinals. Tommy Edman was batting 9th. For the Braves, they were going up against a right-handed pitcher in Tyler Mahle. Matt Olson hit 2nd. Ozzie Albies hit 5th. Dansby Swanson was batting 9th. Michael Brantley still batting 2nd for the Astros. Kyle Tucker was batting 6th. No Jake Fraley against a left-handed pitcher in the Reds lineup. Aristides Aquino was batting 2nd for them. I mentioned no Jonathan Villar for the Cubs. Amed Rosario started in left field for the Guardians. Andres Jimenez was at shortstop. J.D. Davis was the DH and batting 2nd against left-handed pitcher Patrick Corbin. No Dominic Smith in that game. And then Joe Madden being Joe Madden. Matt Duffy was the cleanup hitter against left-handed pitcher Framber Valdez on opening day. A bunch of players.
I do want to point something out with that Mets lineup arrangement, though, because okay, it was a lefty, so we saw JD Davis in there, and we saw Brandon Nimmo not in there, which I don't think is the two that we were necessarily expecting to platoon in that lineup. So what they did was they played Jeff McNeil in left field. They played Robinson Cano, the presumptive DH, at second base, and JD Davis was in the lineup at utility. So, and by the way, Mark Canha was playing center field. So if they're willing to go with that defensive alignment here on opening day, they're willing to play Canha in center. They're willing to play Jeff McNeil in left. They're willing to play Robinson Cano at second base. What that tells me is that there's room for both Cano and Dominic Smith in that lineup if they want there to be. Now, I have a hard time believing they're going to send Brandon Nimmo against righties, as good of an on-base guy as he is, but I thought it was interesting.
Yep. Worth mentioning, Scott, Brandon Nimmo not in the lineup. He's dealing with that neck injury too. So
okay. Yeah.
I think that was like the main reason he was out, but yeah.
They don't like him against righties anyway, though.
I was watching that
I
game.
mean, lefties. They don't like him against lefties.
Yeah, Robinson Cano, brutal in the field. The guy's done. They cannot play him at second base, which I don't know what that means for Dominic Smith, but he was bad, man. The range, he's nearly 40 years old, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
But I don't know how long that experiment is going to last. Robinson Cano at second base. A bunch of players officially placed in the IL on Thursday: Jacob deGrom, Lance Lynn, Shane Baz, Lance McCullers, Dylan Floro, Josh Rojas, Ken Giles, Mike Clevenger, Kyle Lewis, James Caprillion, and James Karinchak. Let's take a quick break. When we return, we'll take a look at some hitting performances from opening day here on Fantasy Baseball today. All right, Scott, I want to quickly run through some rookie debuts. I don't know that there's much to take away from this, but worth talking about. Seiya Suzuki, 1 for 2 with 2 walks and a run scored. I was really impressed by his approach, the plate discipline, especially going up against Corbin Burns. He just did not look intimidated at all. Bobby Witt Jr. went 1 for 4 with the go-ahead RBI double in the 8th inning of that game. I saw him trying to leg out a ground ball too, flying. The guy was flying down the line. Like, the speed is legit. Like, Bobby Witt is going to steal 20-plus bases if he stays healthy. I feel pretty confident in that. And then Steven Kwan, he went 1 for 2 with 2 walks. One of those came against a very tough lefty in Jake Brentz. He is only 13% rostered. So I guess of all these 3, Scott, the only one that you can add if you want to is Steven Kwan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that they kept him in to face that lefty. Because my biggest concern, some on the Guardians beat were making it sound like he made the roster because they needed an extra outfielder and he had a good spring, and not necessarily like he was going to be a cog in the Guardians lineup, that the organization viewed him that way. But he had very impressive numbers in the minors last year, walked more than he struck out, and showed power for the first time. So I think in any leagues that penalize extra for strikeouts, like a -1 point for every hitter K, Kwan needs to be rostered. And in certain 5 outfielder leagues, probably have to be 12-team league or more, probably needs to be rostered in those formats too.
Robert Suarez has walked the first 2 batters that he's faced, and the Padres are rapidly getting their bullpen up with other arms. So I'll keep you posted with what happens here. All right, Scott, a few hitter performances that are worth talking about in terms of waiver wire availability. Where should these hitters be rostered, if anywhere? Andrew McCutchen, we just spoke about yesterday. He went 2 for 5 with a double, an RBI, 4 hard hit balls. He's 36% rostered. Both of his hits came against a right-handed pitcher in Kyle Hendricks, and Andrew McCutchen was brutal against right-handed pitchers last year. Where, if anywhere, should we be adding Andrew McCutchen?
Well, I like him as a sleeper in week 2. He's my number 2 sleeper hitter. And yeah, I like him in a general sense too. It's always tough this time of year because the roster space is so limited, and just because I don't think, he's the old guy. He's the old guy who appeared to be in obvious decline last year. So I don't think after a 2 for 5 performance on opening day, your league mates are rushing to add Andrew McCutchen. So I'd kind of play it cool for right now, unless there's just somebody you're dying to drop. But yeah, keep an eye on McCutchen.
All right. Ian Happ went 3 for 4 with 2 doubles, 2 RBI, 0 strikeouts, 4 hard hit balls. He is 47% rostered. Where, Scott, should we add Ian Happ, if anywhere?
So he is among my top 10 sleeper hitters for next week, but he's a lower priority than McCutchen. I know one of those doubles was pretty cheap. It should have been a fly out. Yelich just didn't get to it in time.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's a lot of downside with Happ, even though there's some power too.
Miles Straw went 2 for 4 with a walk and a stolen base. He is 45% rostered. We were talking before the show, Scott. I said this guy needs to be rostered in every categories league. The problem is there might only be 45% of CBS leagues are category leagues. So I don't know if
I'm not even sure it's that many.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't be viewing Miles Straw as a points league guy at this stage anyway.
Yeah. If he's available, again, though, head-to-head categories, any type of roto league, 3 outfielders, 5 outfielders, again, any categories, Miles Straw should be rostered in your league. Maybe take this with a grain of salt because the Nationals pitching is awful. Patrick Corbin was on the mound on Thursday, and I think that we're going to be targeting using hitters against the Nationals pitching staff all season. but each of Mark Canha, Robinson Cano, and Jeff McNeil had 2 hits on Thursday, Scott, and they are all under 50% rostered. Are you excited to add any of those? Canha, Cano, McNeil?
Not really. My favorite is probably Cano, actually, but we'll see if he's, he was in the lineup for a lefty on opening day. Obviously, we'll see if he's definitively an everyday player and go from there. But no, after one game, him getting 2 hits, that doesn't really mean much to me.
All right. Stud hitters doing stud things. Just quick mention here. Austin Riley, 3 for 4 with his first homer. A very welcome sight for you, Scotty. Juan Soto crushed his first home run of the season. The Cardinals just had an absolute onslaught against the Pirates. They put up 9 runs in that game. Home runs for each of Tyler O'Neill, Nolan Arenado, and Tommy Edman. O'Neill went 2 for 5 with a homer, 5 RBI in that game. He was batting third. That's the case. Lots of RBI opportunities for Tyler O'Neill this season. Paul Goldschmidt went 1 for 1 with 4 walks and his first steal. It was such an odd line to look at, but it was a great game for him. He was 12 for 12 in steals last season, and I don't know. I mean, if he's running on opening day, maybe he can get double-digit steals again. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't take many stolen bases to be relevant in stolen bases, and already he has 1. So that's notable, I would say. Also in that Pirates Cardinals game, we didn't mention it in the reliever talk. Chris Stratton worked the 7th inning of a game that was 5-0 at the time. The Pirates were trailing 5-0. It ended up being a 9-0 game, and Stratton was used in the 7th. So that is a blow to his save prospects. And I would say you could drop him for any of those relievers we were discussing earlier. You could drop him for anyone you want, frankly, because I don't feel like he's going to be that useful based on that opening day usage.
All right, Scott, 2 pitchers I want to mention in terms of either pitch mix or velocity change that I noticed on opening day. Max Fried, he was mediocre. Actually, the final line ended up quite bad. 5 earned runs over 5 2/3, 5 strikeouts. But his fastball velo was up 1.3 miles per hour in this start. And opposing him, Tyler Mahle, who routinely pitches very well on the road. He did that again here in Atlanta. 5 innings, 1 run, 7 strikeouts. But what caught my eye is he used a cutter 15% of the time in the start, a pitch that he has not used since 2019. So if we're talking about a 4-pitch mix for Mahle, where he's using a 4-seam, a slider, a splitter, and a cutter, it might raise the overall upside for him.
It might, but I'm not convinced the cutter's that good. So I wouldn't want him to. I wouldn't want him to use it that much. It might be useful as sort of a changeup. I mean, it's the second hardest pitch, but maybe it looks more like the fastball than the others do, and can help keep hitters off balance. But I don't think he's going to miss a lot of bats with it. So I don't know what to make of it yet. But yeah, it was interesting that he brought it back after 2 years of not throwing it.
All right. A few starters who were pitching in relief, or I guess just pitchers we don't really know what their role is yet, but Tristan McKenzie, he pitched in relief in this game. 3 innings, 2 runs, 2 walks, 1 strikeout. The Guardians don't need a 5th starter until April 12th. I haven't seen anything, so I'm just going to assume Tristan McKenzie is still in their rotation.
I think so. I will point out he had 1 swinging strike on 47 pitches.
He could not command his fastball at all either. I was watching that game.
Yeah.
So not great for my guy, Tristan McKenzie. Aaron Ashby with the Brewers, a popular breakout sleeper candidate. 1 2/3, 3 hits, 1 run, 1 strikeout. Scott, they haven't really revealed if they're going with a 6-man rotation yet or not. So I
presume not, since it was worked this hard on opening day. I mean, I guess we point out McKenzie is still able to make his next turn if they want him to. So I guess you could say the same for Ashby if it's a 6-man rotation. But I don't know. And I will reiterate, his velocity was down close to a couple miles per hour in this first appearance.
All right. Would you drop Ashby for Tyler Megill, Scott?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, Ashby probably isn't going to be that usable right away anyway. And I really like the upside Megill showed. So hope to sneak Ashby through and maybe have a shot at him later.
One other bullpen note, the Royals, Josh Stallman entered with 2 outs and the game tied in the 7th inning. And then Scott Barlow pitched in the 8th to face the heart of the lineup in a tie game. The Royals took the lead in the bottom of the inning. And then Scott Barlow came back out to pitch the 9th. So he pitched 2 innings. He wound up with the win. And he looked very dominant doing so. So I think some confidence there in Scott Barlow. Robert Suarez update. He walked 2 and then hit another batter, and he's out of the game. And now Craig Stammen is coming in with the bases loaded, no outs, and a 2-run lead. So good luck, buddy.
Stammen's an interesting choice, but
yeah. Well, Pierce Johnson pitched before that, and they used Tim Hill in the 7th. I know he's a lefty specialist, so
yeah.
All right. I want to quickly just talk about in the start, Scott, Darvish. 6 no-hit innings, 4 walks to 3 strikeouts. And we're talking before, it's like kind of a weird start because obviously, look, 6 no-hit innings are 6 no-hit innings. It's impressive, but his spin rates were way down. He didn't get a ton of swings and misses in this game. I don't know if he was actually good or the Diamondbacks are just bad.
Or, I mean, it's just, I don't know that it has to be either. I think there's some pretty good hitters in the Diamondbacks lineup, and maybe they just didn't happen to get hits today. But yeah, I think I'm more discouraged than encouraged by Darvish's performance. The lack of strikeouts, all the walks, the spin rates being down. He looked pretty impressive in spring training, and there was talk of how he was dealing with a hip injury throughout the second half last year that kind of impacted his lower body, and maybe that was an explanation for his struggles. But I have further questions after this first start, even though it was 6 no-hit innings.
All right. Framber Valdez was awesome in his start against the Los Angeles Angels. 6 2/3 shutout, 2 hits, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts. He had 11 swinging strikes on 84 pitches. The sinker velo was actually up 1 mile per hour. So all around a great performance for Framber Valdez. The Astros are up 3-1 in the 8th inning. And
Seth Beer just hit a 3-run ding dong.
Ooh,
Our guy Craig Stammen.
Jeez.
Mm-hmm.
Is that that's a walk-off too.
Yeah. Oh,
wow.
Yeah. He heard you say.
Damn.
He heard you say they're bad. He wanted to show you.
Beer me.
Seth Beer.
Seth Beer. Let's go. Ding dong. All right. Yeah, Diamondbacks win in dramatic fashion. All right, Scott, let's wrap up. I think that's pretty much everything we need to hit on for opening day, and we'll get into your week 2 sleepers here. Again, we spoke about some of these names yesterday. I think there'll probably be some overlap, but for people who are playing in the short week 1, just setting your lineup for this Thursday through Sunday, you're going to have to set your lineups again on Monday, April 11th through Sunday, April 17th. So there are 2 teams that have 5 games next week. That is the Diamondbacks and the Astros. There are 14 teams with 7 games next week. And the Rockies, we're always watching to see where the Rockies are playing. They have 6 games. 4 of those are coming at home next week. Scott, why don't you kick us off with some sleeper pitchers here in week 2?
Well, you mention there are 2 teams with 5 games?
Yes, the D-backs and the Astros.
Okay, yeah. And I also want to mention we're calling this week 2. We're from this point forward, we're numbering the weeks according to leagues that went with the short week 1 because that's the CBS default. So
I hate the short week, by the way. I should have mentioned that in yesterday's podcast. If you play in a head-to-head matchup, 4 days of baseball for some teams, 3 days, it's just not enough. So I like to play the long week, but
you can't be sure you're going to get a full lineup of starting pitchers. That's for sure. I think that's probably the biggest downside to it. But yeah, we're numbering the weeks based on the short week. So officially, this is known as week 2, even though your week 2 may not begin till the following Monday. Anyway, sleeper pitchers for week 2. So I initially sent you Tony Gonsolin at the top of this list, but the Dodgers have rearranged their rotation, so he's just a 1-start pitcher against the Reds. I still think he qualifies as a sleeper pitcher, though. I like him this year, and this will be his 2nd start in week 2. So hopefully he'll be stretched out a little more than a lot of the guys we saw pitch here in the opener. I like Matt Brash. He's in line for 2 starts at the White Sox versus the Astros. Tough matchup, but I think the skills are enough that him being a 2-start pitcher. I'd be willing to roll the dice on that, unless I had a staff full of studs. Carlos Carrasco against the Diamondbacks. I'm hopeful in a rebound for him, and that's a good matchup. Jordan Montgomery at Baltimore. The matchups don't get much better than that. I think that's why you roster somebody like Montgomery for matchups like that. Couple more 2-star guys. Nestor Cortez versus Toronto at Baltimore. Okay. That makes it worth using, I think, in leagues where you're looking to fill a pitching spot. Not saying he's must start or anything, but we're talking sleepers. We're just focusing on guys who are available. Dakota Hudson versus Pittsburgh at Milwaukee. Those are two pretty good matchups. Obviously not going to give you a lot of strikeouts, but he's a good ground ball pitcher. Mitch Keller gets the Nationals in their not so great lineup in his first start. Might be worth a roll of the dice. See how that new velocity plays in a regular season setting. Merrill Kelly at the Mets. Zach Eflin at the Marlins. And one more 2-start option here. Huascar Ynoa versus the Nationals at the Padres. Probably wouldn't recommend him if it was a 1-start pitcher with either of those matchups, but for 2, at least in a points league, somebody to consider.
Scott, you can't make this up. Apparently, Thursday, April 7th, when technically we started recording this after midnight, but when the Diamondbacks game started, it was Thursday, April 7th, which is National Beer Day. Boom.
Wow.
You cannot make that up. Seth Beer with the walk-off on National Beer Day.
They
That is
already
awesome.
named the day after him.
For sure. All right, let's get into some sleeper hitters here as well. I don't see Seth Beer on this list. Who are some names you like, Scott?
Seth Beer. Oh, no, not with the Diamondbacks playing 5 games.
No.
Okay, so the Rockies are at the Rangers against 2 bad pitchers and then at home for 4 games. So I like Randall Grichuk. He's my number 1 sleeper hitter for this upcoming week. Andrew McCutchen, as I mentioned earlier, he's number 2. The Brewers have 4 lefties on the schedule in 7 games, and he crushed lefties to the tune of like 1,000 OPS last year. And we think he's healthier this year. So like those 2 a lot. The Tigers have the 3rd best matchups this upcoming week. And I like Robbie Grossman, who's available in nearly half of CBS Sports leagues. I like him for either format, frankly. A little further down the list here, Jonathan Scope, Jeimer Candelario. The sort of borderline hitters you're going to see in this recommended often just because of the roster, the range they're rostered in, So whenever they have good matchups, we're probably going to talk about them a lot. Adam Duvall, I don't, the matchups aren't blow you away good, but I just think the matchups are decent. He's too good to be as available as he is. He's going to drive in a ton of runs this year, I think, again, and hit a ton of home runs. Ian Happ, who we mentioned earlier, I like the Cubs matchups. I actually like them most of all. So, I don't know that I love Ian Happ as a hitter, but the matchups make him worth it. Connor Joe, we'll see how much he plays, but he has the same favorable matchups as Grichuk, and he's highly available. Lane Thomas is also highly available. 7-game week for the Nationals with 3 lefties on the schedule, and he did most of his damage against lefties last year. And finally, Alejandro Kirk, I'm going to mention here, who's still available in 1/3 of CBS Sports leagues. The Blue Jays get 7 games. I think if he starts 4 or 5 of those games, you'll be happy with that you used Kirk in your catcher spot, unless you have an obvious stud there, of course. But if you're, he's an upgrade over somebody like, I don't know, who's a fringe catcher, Gary Sanchez, somebody like that.
Yeah.
I'd definitely swap him out for Kirk.
All right. Scott, of all the names on this list, who do you think will be this year's CJ Cron? Because I feel like you had CJ Cron on the list of sleeper hitters every single week, or at least when he was home.
Well, until he became too rostered to be on the list, right? That eventually happened.
Yeah. I think it's going to be Randall Grichuk, Scott. I think he's
you have the Colorado angle going on there.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised he's only 57% rostered on CBS for as much as we were hyping him after the trade, as much as we moved him up in our rankings. So it could be him. Yeah. I mean, as long as he's as available as he is, anytime the Rockies are home, I'm probably going to recommend him. But until I would say Adam Duvall has a chance to be too, until he gets that roster rate up. He's just he could just do so much damage in a short period of time.
All right, all right, Duvall name there for you. The teams with the best hitter matchups again: the Cubs, the Pirates, the Tigers, the Rockies, and the Brewers. The teams with the worst hitter matchups in week 2: the Reds, the Phillies, the Diamondbacks, the Giants, and the Cleveland Guardians. And we are going to end the podcast with streamers for the weekend. And we're going to do this. We're going to end every podcast with this. To stream or not to stream is what we like to call this. And for those of you who play in daily lineup leagues, we'll run through some pitchers. I'll ask Scott, you feel all right streaming this guy for the next day or the day after that? And yes or no. And we'll end the podcast with this. Scott, a lot of these names are ones that we've already talked about. These were a lot of your sleeper pitchers, but
wait. I thought you gave me the whole list, and then I gave you 1 or 2 favorites from that list.
Is that what we did last year?
Yeah, because the yes or no thing was
just
a lot of no's. Yeah.
So I tried to cut out the players that I just knew that you automatically were going to say no. So I don't know. Maybe this will be a little bit more efficient. But for Friday, if people are looking to stream in daily lineup leagues, Josiah Gray against the Mets. I'll just throw them all your way, and you tell me who you like. Josiah Gray against the Mets, Reed Detmers against the Astros, Merrill Kelly against the Padres, Jake Odorizzi at the Angels.
Yeah, the only one I might roll the dice on is Merrill Kelly against the Padres. I think that's the best matchup for the 4 pitchers, and I'm hopeful he found something this spring with that reworked changeup.
All right. On Saturday, we have Drew Rasmussen against the Orioles, Mitch Keller at the Cardinals, Miles Michaelis against the Pirates, and Kyle Gibson against the Oakland A's.
I will say I'm okay with streaming Rasmussen, Keller, or Michaelis, probably in that order. You know what? I'd probably do Mitch Keller first. I think this upside is the highest. I don't think Rasmussen, even with that matchup against the Orioles, is going to go deep enough to make a big impact. But Keller might. So Keller, Rasmussen, and then Michaelis.
I think I like Kyle Gibson the best.
Oh, really? Well, yeah, it's the best matchup, Oakland.
Yeah, I don't know how. I don't think Kyle Gibson is that good, but
right.
Oakland is just really bad. So.
I will almost always prioritize the pitcher over the matchup, unless it's a really close call. Okay. And I think Gibson's clearly the worst pitcher here.
And then on Sunday, just 2 names here. A lot of pitchers for Sunday are either too highly rostered or they are just bad. So I did not include them. We have Zach Eflin against the Oakland A's and Bailey Ober against the Mariners.
They're both fine. They're both fine streamers.
All right. There you go, Scotty. Opening day is in the books. For Scott, I'm Frank. Thank you all for listening and watching Fantasy Baseball Today. We'll be back again on Monday. Bye-bye.